So in this module, we're going to be talking about the economics of the cloud, and we're going to cover several topics. First of all, we're going to be looking at the funding differences between traditional data centers and the cloud. And then we're going to look at the AWS provided tools for the organization of our costs. And then we'll be utilizing AWS tools to actually make a case for moving our organization to the cloud. And then we'll be exploring AWS costs using the AWS provided tools. Now to start off with, I want to talk about two terms that have to do with how we finance our projects. The first term is capitalized expenditure, or CapEx. So let's say you're building your own data center. So when you're building that data center, you have to make a large upfront investment, and that's going to cover buildings and servers and supporting equipment. Now this type of expense is there to attain a fixed asset, and we're going to call that a capitalized expenditure. Now the other type of expenditure we're going to talk about is an operating expenditure, or OpEx. And this has to do with the regular day-to-day expenses of your business, and these are OpEx. So when you build a data center, your ongoing costs around connectivity and your utilities and your maintenance costs, those would be considered OpEx. Now you might be saying, what does this have to do with the cloud? Well, let's dive into that. Let's talk first about having your own data center. So if you have your own data center, let's say that you decided to launch an application within that data center. And let's say that here is your demand. It starts off pretty low because it's a new application. But then it continues to grow. And you can even see, for example, that between month 2 and month 3, it more than doubled. And so with this, we're going to now look at our capacity. So our data center was built to handle an initial amount of capacity, and we're noticing here that there are a few problems. First of all, we have unused capacity. So when our data center launched and we then launched our application within the data center, we had to account for the amount of capacity that we believed our application needed. So in the beginning, before users were leveraging our application, there was a lot of unused capacity, and that's capacity that we're paying for whether it gets used or not. But then we have another even more critical issue, and that's that we have demand over capacity, and that means in these cases, we have users that are getting denied access to our application because we don't have the data center power that we need to actually serve those users. So if you notice between month 4 and month 5, we decided to make an investment and build out our data center to handle more capacity. Now let's talk about how you fund this type of initiative. So, initially, when you're building out your own data center, you're first going to have a very large upfront capitalized expenditure, or CapEx, to build out your data center, to take care of that building and all of those servers that are going to be needed. Then you're going to have an operational expenditure that's going to happen month to month. But if you notice when we increased our capacity between month 4 and month 5, we had another large upfront capitalized expenditure followed by an increased operational expenditure as we now have to operate more servers and more equipment. Now this is how it works with your own data center. But let's talk about how this works in the cloud. So let's say that we have the exact same application with the exact same demand in the cloud. Now in this case, we're able to do something different with capacity. We're able to make sure that we have just enough capacity to meet the demand that our users have for our application. And another thing is different. Let's look at the costs. So here with the costs in the cloud, so there is no capitalized expenditure because we're leveraging the cloud. And here our operational expenditure mirrors what we have in terms of the demand. So what does all of this mean? Well, let's compare and contrast our own data center and cloud infrastructure. So with our own data center, there is a large upfront cost, that's CapEx. Also, there's a potential for either underused capacity or unmet demand, and in many cases, these are going to be inevitable unless you can predict the future. Also, increasing capacity takes time and additional investment because you have to order servers, you have to build onto your data center, you have to add additional cooling and networking and a lot of other things to support your data center. And that doesn't just happen overnight. So you're going to have situations where if there is a need for increased demand, there will be time that will elapse before you can meet that. Then monthly costs in this case will map to predicted infrastructure needs. This is why I mentioned earlier that you need to be able to predict the future if you're going to go down this path because you're going to in this case have costs that align with what you think the demand will be. But now let's talk about cloud infrastructure. So first of all, there's no upfront investment, so you don't have that large CapEx at the front end because you're not building out your own data center. Next, you pay as you go for infrastructure, and this pay-as-you-go concept is critical because it allows you to only pay for the demand that your users have, and it can scale to meet that demand, and that additional capacity can be provisioned immediately, which is a big difference to having to build onto your data center and add more servers, and another factor is that monthly costs will map directly to the user demand. Thanks for watching our video. For more videos, please take 1 second and press the button below, like, subscribe, and bell icon.